Welcome to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco, bringing you interviews with industry experts and regular folks who tested the job search waters and succeeded, and strategies to tell your story and land your job interviews in 60 days, guaranteed. Here's your host, Virginia Franco.
Hey folks, I am so excited to have with me today Ed on. I've followed him for years. He knows a ton about job search, but he's actually a recruiter and a job seeker ally, and his passion is networking and helping professionals return to the workforce. He is a veteran of several industries, publishing, financial services, and software, which gives him a really unique understanding and appreciation for all the skills and traits that are valued in a wide range of environments. He is very active in his community and facilitates the job search group, New Jersey Job Seekers in Princeton. He has also previously served as the executive chair of the PSG of Mercer County and as the online community manager for the HR networking group Wine and Dine. Since the fall of 2017, he's also been an adjunct instructor at Princeton Adult School, where he leads a course about LinkedIn. Ed, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Virginia. I really appreciate the invitation to be on the podcast. Thanks very much. Great to be here.
So tell me, how did you make the jump from what you were doing before into the world of recruiting?
Well, it's a funny story, but like all the best job search success stories, it came from networking. I had gotten to know someone via social media, and I'm sure that's a completely foreign concept for you. So we gotten to know each other. She recognized quickly that I was fairly knowledgeable about LinkedIn, and she invited me to help her do a LinkedIn webcast, an online webinar geared towards job seekers. And so we got along very well from there, and then about, I guess, 9 to 12 months later, she asked me the classic question, hey, do you know someone who would like to be a recruiter? And I had done a bunch of other stuff prior to that, but I said, well, as a matter of fact, yes, me. How do we move this conversation forward? And fast forwarded like days later, and I had a new job and a new career and ultimately a new passion.
That is amazing. And so you're so it totally exemplifies how people find jobs by never applying to a job online. You didn't go apply to be a recruiter, post on 1,000 job boards. You had a skill and you showed how you could use it, and it led to an offer. It led to conversations and then an offer.
Yeah, exactly.
Although I have to say, this is the first time I've heard of a recruiter becoming a recruiter from having done a webcast on LinkedIn. So I love that, or about LinkedIn. So that is a first. So you work with all sorts of job seekers, I know. What do you see, or is there something that you see that is common in terms of, problems that they're facing?
Yes, actually, I do see. Look, Virginia, you've had a lot of these conversations. You've had more of these conversations actually than I have. But I think that you have seen certain common themes arise in the past several years. One that I particularly am passionate about, however, is the employment gap when it's precipitated by caregiving. So
when they have to leave to go take care of parents or children or whatever the case may be.
Exactly. And, this is extremely common. I see this at least once a week on a resume. I'm sure you see it all the time yourself, right? And
people struggling with how much to disclose, what not to,
Exactly.
All of that, it's a huge issue.
You don't want to penalize people for being dutiful family members, sons and daughters, spouses, what have you, right? And these are people who are doing a good thing, and yet it is harming their job search. And that makes me crazy.
I completely agree. And I'd love to. So tell me the second one, but then I want to loop back and ask you a question about that first one.
Of course.
So
Sure.
helping people address an employment gap. Yeah, because you're right. They're penalized. They're penalized for being good human beings, and that's not fair.
Exactly. I mean, it just goes to the old saying, no good deed goes unpunished, right?
Yeah. Right.
And it makes me absolutely nuts when I encounter it. The other thing, however, the other trend that I'm noticing, however, is increasingly I encounter people who explain to me that they are career reinventors. And I'm sure everyone in the coaching and resume writing space had a lot of these conversations, especially in 2009, right? When the Great Recession hit.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
People who, right? I mean, all these people who had spent decades doing X.
Desperation bred reinvention.
Exactly. And so, I am seeing some of it again, which surprises me a little bit, but, that's kind of where we are, I guess.
I'm not surprised because I'm seeing it a lot more too. I feel like the recession bred it because you were rock bottom. There was nothing, literally nothing to lose. And now things are so healthy the other way that people feel like, again, what do I have to lose?
Right.
We sort of at both ends of the spectrum.
Right. And so on some level, I think, part of the phenomenon that we're seeing is the old golden handcuff thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But look, and I know you said you wanted to go back to the employment gap.
Yeah. So, I do in the dream world when someone has had to take a break because of caretaking, they've somehow managed to take a course or, use their skills pro bono, and then you can sort of help spin it so that they're continuing their they haven't let their skills die down while they're also being great human beings. But one thing that I struggle with, and I see it all the time, is where the situation that made the person leave was so traumatic or so consuming that it was all they could do to deal with the situation, especially when there's grieving and death and trauma involved, and then and it also required a longer gap than they anticipated. Yeah. They thought they'd be out for 3 to 6 months, and it ended up being a year and a half. What's your take on how much to disclose? Because people are private about their family, but I've always felt like, well, you have to sort of justify that you've been gone as long as you have. Curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Sure, of course. Now, look, like I said, as you know, I'm a recruiter, so I see this rather often, So while hiring managers traditionally want to see continuous employment, they get antsy about anyone who's been out for more than a couple months, typically, right? BLS refers to 6 months plus as long-term unemployed, and if that's
right,
that's just tough. There's a whole label for it then, But my thought process is that that it's characterized as a personal sabbatical, where you explain briefly, hey, look, I was a caregiver for a loved one, and it necessitated taking this time out because that is important.
I agree. I agree.
Then,
to let them in a little bit as to what happened, but you don't need to go into gory details. But sort of just justify that it took longer.
Exactly, and people understand these things, especially if the reader, him or herself, has also experienced it or knows someone who did, right? Because look, there's the illness and the caretaking itself. Then if the most unfortunate result happens, then you have funeral arrangements, then you have estate management, then you have probate, and all the things that go along with that. And I've certainly
it's going to be a longer, and then and you have to get back on your feet again.
Exactly, and that's just tough. So that's absolutely my thought process on how to address it. A similar version of this, of course, can be used as well for those who are those who are dealing with a long-term serious illness. The same approach would work, right? Say, listen, I had a health scare. I had a health concern. It has been completely resolved, and I am looking forward to getting back to work and demonstrating, that in putting my skills to use on behalf of your organization.
Yeah. Ready to hit the ground running.
Exactly. And, all the messaging that goes along with that, right?
Well, you and I are of like minds with that, and I'm so grateful to hear it. Is there something that you find that the people that you're working with, maybe it's on the client side, maybe it's on the job seeker side, are something that is just absolutely surprising them, catches them off guard during their job hunts or during the process?
I don't think anything unusual leaps out in that way.
That's good.
Okay, there's no. This is not entirely true. There's one thing I have left out.
Okay.
Certain industries, and I have on my mind particularly right now pharma, because that's where I'm currently doing some work. If you do not have pharma experience, do not attempt to enter unless you're going for an entry-level job. Period.
Entry level. I'd say devices like that too, medical device.
Yeah, I imagine that's probably true, right? I mean, the degree of regulation, it's the most regulated industry in the world, in our country, I should say, excuse me. And unless you've operated in that environment, particularly at a senior level, it's not going to work, period.
No, and I actually, it's hard to make an industry shift. It's hard to overcome the mindset that, well, how can you possibly understand my industry? And whether you agree with it or not, it's just sort of the way it is. And you're right, exactly. Certain industries are harder than others. You've got to be willing to take a step back, and you've got to network even harder to get in, right? You're never going to get it applying online. Okay. Yeah, no, I see that. And the best documents in the world really can only get you so far. Yeah.
Ultimately, that's absolutely the case. Unless you have an internal champion who is willing to go to bat, I just don't see it happening for that specific industry. Yeah, no, I agree. And I'd say any industry jump, you need an internal champion. But you're right. True. I think pharma, I think device, and I'm sure there's others that are you're beating your head against a much more solid wall than others. Yeah. And that's a really good point. So what advice would you give? I'm sure people come up to you all the time going, hey, I need free advice. I know I get it all the time. Sure. Where do you think someone should start when they are thinking about making a career move? Let's say they haven't left yet. Where do you think they should get started? Informational interviews. Okay. Absolutely. How should they go about that? Start with that. Well, actually, there's two things I think that the person should do. Understand what is the driver behind the desire to do a career reinvention, whatever it's going to be, right? Why do you not like what you do now? Is it the position? Is it the organization? Or is it the industry? Right. Do some self-reflection. Exactly. Because if you're, there's a lot of out of the frying pan into the fire that can happen here, and that obviously is not ideal. Well, and that helps you to identify what questions you want to what you should be asking in the informational interviews. Exactly. And then, obviously once you understand these things, once you're able to articulate them, then it's a question of, okay, I understand what the drivers are. Here's a person in a new industry or a new organization or a new job function who does have, the experience within it. Now I know, I know what my previous experience is. I want to understand what the delta is from what I know to what I think I want to pursue, right? And that's the way you get the really relevant information that you need in order to determine, hey, this is or is not a good jump. And if it's a good jump, okay, great. How do I make my entry in a way that makes sense, that leverages my previous experience and what I know.
So you're saying use the interviews to uncover that delta and figure out if it makes sense. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's really good advice. And I know that I've been receptive to people that sort of position it that way, want to see if this is a viable path for them.
Right.
Versus, asking to quote unquote pick my brain with, no specific agenda.
Exactly. And I mean, I certainly do appreciate and enjoy just a very relaxed, casual conversation. However, if the person that you're talking with is receptive to helping you, coming at it with a very specific set of questions and a clear, okay, this is what I really need to know, rather than tell me everything about X. I mean, it's a lot more structured, and more importantly, it empowers that person to give very specific, relevant insights.
Well, you're right. It lets the person on the other end help the job seeker. It puts them in a better position to help the job seeker.
Exactly. It's the old German lawyer thing, right? Help me, help you.
Right. No, that's great advice. What about the person? So we just talked about the person that's looking to make a job search. What about that person who has been at it and it's just not going well?
Okay.
How do you help them figure that out and guide them appropriately?
Okay. So there's a couple of ways that I would try to help such a person. So, and just to be clear, the question you're asking is, okay, someone is doing a career shift. They're not being successful yet. So how do we support that person? Versus the other scenario was someone who
was thinking about doing a job search. So they were getting some advice before they jumped in. This is the person who jumped in and it's not going well.
Okay. So I think that person needs to approach this from the standpoint of a project and have certain milestones that need to be reached in order to determine, hey, is this a path I want to continue? The fact is, a lot of the time, the timetable to complete a job search successfully is defined by forces beyond that job seeker's control, right?
That's true.
And it's unfortunate, but true. So there needs to be some kind of, whatever the routine is a process is that's been established and identified, there needs to be a situation or a trigger that makes you say, okay, I need to reevaluate. I have not achieved X or Y or Z. Is it sensible to continue this? Do I need to pursue a multi-pronged strategy now? So that's the first thing I would say. But the second thing is, provided that person hasn't reached that point, okay, great. So who is the target organizations that you want to be getting into, right? Granted, on a lot of people's employer target list, you're going to find companies like Google or Facebook or
the ones that are really, really hard to get into.
Right, and everyone's got them on their list. Okay, if that's the person you're looking for, okay, tell me the job title of the person you want to connect with. I bet I know someone, or that I know someone who does. Help me to find the connections to help you. I think one of the things that drives me nuts about trying to help people is that they ask a question that is extremely broad and has many possible answers when what they really want to know is something very specific. If my life's ambition is to become an account executive at LinkedIn, because I think they're a terrific organization, and I've been in sales, I've done that sort of thing. That is a much more powerful question to ask, right?
That's true, than just being very vague about it. And I would argue that a lot of people haven't even come up with lists of employers. They haven't even gotten to that point yet. And so maybe reviewing the milestones. I mean, I know I come across people that have just been applying online, spray and pray. But when you sort of look at their if they do approach it as a project manager and they have milestones, you can quickly uncover that they maybe haven't targeted employers. And, and then you can help them sort of figure out where the process or where the project has broken down.
Yes, exactly. Or, here's another way to look at it. Remember back in high school as we were doing our college search process, right? Okay, so you have your reach school. You have the school that you think that you are reasonably certain you have a chance to get into, and you have your safety schools, right?
Safety, that's right. Yep.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense to have all of these things represented on a target list of employers.
Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. I don't think anyone's ever put it to me like that. Treat your target list the way you did back in college with your stretches, your got it, and your safeties. I forget what the name was for the ones that you had a decent chance.
Yeah, I don't know if they actually ever had a name that I
should know that because I'm on my second kid applying to colleges, but I don't remember. So.
Are you really?
No, but that's brilliant. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and the thing is, a lot of the demographic I'm talking with is people who do have kids around that age. So putting in that context, it's extremely helpful to them to, say, oh, yeah, I understand exactly what we're talking about here.
Think like a college kid. Think like your college counselor was telling you to do.
Exactly. Go back to that thought process. You need it again,
You're right. That's that is. And when you think about it, well, I guess the college application process is very different from job search. You do have to apply. You can't bypass unless you have a ton of money and you have a big famous name. But that definitely applies. Oh, I love that.
And
go ahead.
To me, the merit of it is, look, there's the old saying, right? You miss 100% of shots you don't take.
You don't take, yep.
And this is just an example of another way to manifest the same concept as relates to a job search. We want people to get the jobs with the employers they're dreaming of.
Mm-hmm. You're right. You're right. So recognizing that it's more of a stretch than the others, at least you know where you stand on all of them, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I love that. So the next question I want to ask you, how you feel like it should be approached with resumes and on LinkedIn profiles. As I see this all the time, clients that feel like they can go in any number of directions. They are career reinventors, and they say, well, I could do sales, I could do operations, I could, I can do it across a bunch of different industries. How do you feel like they what should they do on their resumes? And then how do they capture that, or do they on LinkedIn?
Okay. I love this question. Thank you very much for asking it.
You're welcome.
Because this is a subject on which I have a number of thoughts, but I will say this. Number one, a friend of mine in the area loves to say that a job search is a journey, and if you have no destination, you will surely reach it. I
love that.
I've been fond of it I'm fond of it because I remember the first time he said it like 5-6 years ago, something like that.
I'm gonna write that down and put it right in front of myself. I love that.
So, the problem is that as a recruiter, if I see a resume and the immediate relevance of the person's background, prior experience, etc., isn't relevant to the position I have in mind, I will have stopped reading within 6 seconds, period. And I've moved on to the next one. Yeah. And while I understand perfectly well that the person is far more than what you see on the resume, the fact of the matter is no one can absorb the entirety of a person short of actually meeting them. So the best thing we got.
That's right. And you don't have the time to take the time to dive through and try to figure it out. Right.
Exactly. So, and I'm sure you tell your clients this all the time. The resume is a marketing document. If I'm in the market for an SUV, don't waste my time with, a compact. That is not relevant to me. You're telling me features I don't care about, right?
I love that analogy.
Oh,
yeah, you're great at. Oh my gosh, yeah. You're right. You're absolutely right. And it is not. I always say it's not your blueprint. This is your brochure, and you've got to make it relevant to what the person needs to see.
Exactly. You know what it's like? It's like the dust jacket on a book you see in a bookstore. If you still go into bookstores, right? What the title, the cover art, and the dust jacket are meant to make you pick up the book, look at it. Once it's in your hand, they've already got you 50% of the way there, right? Because now you're actually physically handling it. Well, okay, great. So what is this book? Let's find out. Okay, dust jacket says it's X, Y, and Z. All right. Well, maybe let's crack it open and see what the first page is like.
Yep, take that deeper dive. Yep.
And then that's so. Go ahead.
No, I interrupted you first. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you need to get past that initial step, and the problem with that a lot of resumes have that I see is people have unfocused resumes. So going back to your question, I'm looking for relevance. If I'm looking for a sales professional and you don't tell me that you're a sales professional in some powerful way, I don't know what to do with that, because unless I'm hiring an entry-level salesperson, I need to see that you are a salesperson. I need that to be obvious and present. And if you're a salesperson, you haven't told me that. If you're a salesperson, you haven't convinced me that you're a salesperson, how can you possibly sell?
Right. And so on the resume, you can certainly customize based on the audience before you. What about on LinkedIn? Right.
And this is where it gets fun. So obviously the resume does need to be customized. And if you're dealing with a professional who has multiple different desired paths they want to do, then clearly they'll need to do a master resume for each of these paths and then customize it accordingly as they present it, right? But in like fashion, the LinkedIn profile needs to be sufficiently broad and yet focused so that it subsumes each of these paths. Now, what I mean by that, so let's say you have someone who's been doing fundraising for the last 12 years, right? Okay, so fundraiser, someone who works in the nonprofit world, right? And most people in the space recognize that a lot of the skills that you develop and use in fundraising are the same ones you would use in biz dev or sales, right?
Right.
So let's say you have someone who's just burnt out on fundraising and that part of things, but recognizes, look, the stuff that I have been doing, the conversations I've been having, would certainly lend themselves to sales or business development. Okay, great. So that's the case. All right. Now in the LinkedIn profile, you're going to have those three different versions of resumes, or two different versions of resumes because they're burnt out on fundraising. So that biz dev and sales. But the LinkedIn profile still needs to be a subset of the LinkedIn profile, just as the individual resumes are subsets of either biz dev or sales resumes. So
you're saying that you need to, and I agree, that you have to show how your career journey or your career progression aligns with whichever role you're targeting. So it's focused towards, here are the common skills, and then you take that and your resume can be targeted for those, for fundraising or for sales.
Right.
And I agree. And when I work with clients that want to go in a couple different directions, I do try to say, we got to pin it down. There's got to be, I need to see if I'm going to group like skills together, I need to show alignment. You can't be, this is facetious, but you can't be a yoga instructor and a orthodontist. There's got to be some like-minded skills. So, because you have to show how it aligns, or if otherwise the reader will be left confused, and then you've gotten them nowhere.
Exactly. And then, the one thing there are two things you can never afford to inspire in the reader of a resume or a LinkedIn profile. Those are A, boredom, or B, confusion.
Which one do you think is worse?
I'm going to go with confusion as being worse.
I agree.
Because
they both think, but yeah.
Unfortunately, the fact is a lot of messaging on resumes and LinkedIn profiles is not exceptional. Because it's unexceptional, it fades into the background. But if I remember something because I didn't like it, that is much worse.
You're right. Exactly. So true. Oh, my goodness. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this next topic, which is age discrimination. Go ahead.
I want to go back to the LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
Concept for that.
Okay. Yes. Always.
One of the things that does tend to inspire boredom is the fact that everyone is detail-oriented, passionate, professional.
Yeah. Rid of adjectives. Yeah.
Yep. And I'm yawning myself as I say it,
Yeah. They used to work. I mean, I wrote before the recession, fabulous adjectives worked back then. They don't anymore. Everyone uses them. Yeah.
Because everyone was reading all the blogs have been written and all the articles have been written since the Great Recession, and now learned the trick. And now it's just, and now
diluted, has no value. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. No.
But what I do...
I can replace adjectives with details about you.
Right. And what you just said, that's the heart of where it's going to go. You need to give someone something unique. You need to present them with your unique value proposition, whatever that may be. And if you are able to articulate this, and it's a meaningful, relevant value proposition, they will read the rest word for word.
And and we are on the same page. That value prop or that summary might be all they look at. So if you don't leave them with enough information that lets them understand how you're different than others and makes you stand out, they're never going to keep on going. And describing yourself as detail-oriented and experience and all those, you'll never stand out because everyone uses that same language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Agree.
That was
agree. No worries. All right. So now let's talk about discrimination.
Sure.
There's always talk about it. Some industries it's worse than others.
Yep.
I know I have techniques that I use to try to mitigate it, but curious to know your thoughts on how you educate, clients and job seekers.
So part of recruiting is understanding, you don't have to be an expert on EEO guidelines, but you have to at least be, certainly be familiar with what they are.
Yeah.
Right? It's very simple. Does this person have the skills to do the job? Yes, no. Does the other factors, the packaging in which those competencies reside and walk around and go to meetings and have lunch are immaterial. The packaging is immaterial. Let's focus instead on what are the person's capabilities. What do they bring to the table? And therefore, here's the thing. While I certainly will educate people who express something to me that is a violation of EEO, when I talk with job seekers, what I always tell them is, eventually, these people are going to meet you. They're going to see what you look like and hear how you speak, and they're going to draw certain conclusions from that information. Some of them will be good. Some of them may be discriminatory. But they're going to find it out
the
somewhere.
judgment is going to come into play, right or wrong.
Exactly. They're going to discover this, present it, therefore, up front, because if you are if you're a person who may be the victim of that kind of discrimination, even if you were hired, you would be miserable there.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to your initial point about targeting the right employer. So if you're 60 years old, you maybe wouldn't be so happy with a company that focuses on hiring much younger people. Maybe not, but
you never know, right? I mean, I knew a guy who was obviously in the spring chicken, very senior fellow. He'd been at GE, had led a number of divisions, very senior guy. He was being recruited by a lot of startups in the area who wanted a very senior person because they felt it gave them credibility in meetings that there was a, quote, grown-up in the room.
Okay. They needed his expertise. So you don't get it when you haven't been in the workforce as long, right? So that was a company that valued the experience.
Exactly.
Right.
Unfortunately, there are going to be some that haven't gotten that memo yet. And ultimately, they will experience issues of their own, unfortunately.
Yeah, no. And I always just try to, when I'm creating documents, I just want to make that a non-issue to start out with, present them as current as possible, use current lingo, current formatting, all of that, so that the packaging does become immaterial. But hopefully you've done your homework to identify the kinds of companies where the culture and the values and all of that align with what's important to you.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not 100% unilateral. There needs to be a little bit. Not. And unfortunately, that's something else that I realize now is something that makes me crazy about talking with job seekers. Because they don't sometimes understand that it isn't all what the employer wants. It can't be.
That's right. It's a two-way street. No, exactly. And when you feel like you are empowered to choose companies of interest, it to me, it helps remove the victim complex of everyone thinks I'm too old. Everyone thinks I'm too this or that. Okay, I'd like to move on to a cheerier question.
Sure.
What are one or two tools that you think that a job seeker or career changer cannot be without during their journey? It's sort of like, I'm going on an island. What do I need to survive? Yep. What would you say?
Let's say we're talking about the case of what in recruiter parlance is an active candidate. So in an active search, potentially not currently employed, right?
Okay.
Or underemployed, which certainly
underemployed. Okay.
Too. Absolutely indispensable. Absolutely critical. An in-person networking group that meets at least weekly. Absolutely indispensable.
How do you recommend they find those?
You can find them easily enough on Meetup. Most public libraries will have one. Most larger houses of worship may offer one. These are typically, it's in the community's best interest to help these people. So community institutions such as a house of worship or a library, certainly, if they're staffed well enough, might offer such services. Okay. However,
so they need support.
They need to get out of the house and talk to other people. And they need absolutely to talk with people who are going through the same kind of thing, understand it, because no one else understands it as keenly as someone else who's in search. No one.
Yeah.
So you need that support. You need also that impetus to get out of your home and not just sit there and blindly click, apply.
Yeah.
I find that absolutely vital.
Yeah.
So a job club, absolutely. Also, outplacement firms, if they have meetings in the area, some of them, usually they offer something of that kind. And eventually, when the outplacement program wraps up, sometimes those people still need to meet. So they'll meet at like a local supermarket or a Panera or, whatever.
I love that. Yeah, you're right. Because you can spiral emotionally if you don't have that kind of a regular support.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So that's for the unemployed or underemployed.
Yeah. For those who are looking to get out of a position that they currently have, I would absolutely say meet up, because they want to go to networking groups. They want to meet other people. They want to have informational interviews with people. And if they go to networking events, guess what? It's self-selecting for people who want to have conversations with other people.
Do you feel like they need to meet as regularly as the active candidates?
I don't. The problem is headspace management for the active candidate.
That's right. Yeah.
So
more of a touchstone than a.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why I consider it so vital for them. But for passive candidates, for people who are currently employed and looking to change employer, that sort of thing, go to networking events. You find them on Meetup easily enough. These tend to, again, like I said, be self-selecting groups of people. And you never know where that next opportunity is going to come from, right? I mean, my own career transition certainly is evidence of that.
Well, and to your point, they're breeding grounds for informational interview candidates.
Exactly.
And you don't have to bang on the door to get them to answer you, because they're obviously a place where they're attending those meetings. They're open to discussions.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's really smart. Well, Ed, I want to close out with my favorite question. I'd love to hear what is next for you. What do you have going on?
Well, there's one thing I can't talk about just yet. It's not really official. I'm looking forward to returning for what will be my third year at Princeton Adult School in October. So that'll be fun. It's a 3-session LinkedIn course that I teach there. So that's been a lot of fun. It's been a great source of knowledge, actually, for me as well, because one of the things I've always noticed is that people always ask me something that I'm not entirely certain I know. Then I need to research it, and I learn something that I perhaps didn't before. And I love that. That's wonderful.
And LinkedIn changes so fast. I mean,
that too.
What better way to keep up with it? Yeah. Is that course available online, or do you have to live in the area?
It's strictly brick and mortar.
For locals. Okay. All right. Well, that's exciting. And then I guess if people want to see what officially is going on with you, they'll just have to check out your LinkedIn profile, right?
Yeah.
When you make it more current. So what if someone wants to connect with you, ask your advice? What is the best way? I've got your social on the bio, but what's the way that you'd like people to reach out to you the most?
The way I would really love for people to reach out to me is look at my LinkedIn profile, click on connect, and then send a note telling me you listen to Virginia's podcast.
Love that. Thank you.
Because I don't know where your listener, that given listener, is coming from. They could be in New Zealand for all I know, and I have no idea why a person from New Zealand wants to connect with me. I'd like to know that.
I do too. I love when people send me a message explaining how they made the connection with me. It number one, it helps me to remember who they are. But it just shows that the person's taken that extra time, and that's shout out to making personalized connection requests.
Yeah, I love the note. I love the note. It makes me happy.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for taking the time. I've learned a lot. I think I have 3 quotes that I'm going to, like I said, print out and frame for future use. I will make sure to quote you. But thank you again, and I hope you have a great week.
Thanks very much, Virginia. I appreciate you having me on the podcast.
Take care.
And you as well.
You've been listening to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco. To learn more about storytelling strategies to catch the eye of today's skim online readers, hiring and decision makers, go to www.virginiafrancoresumes.com.